d'etats have taken place over the last 3 years in the West African states of Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. Military governments are in each of these countries still. The latest happened on the 26th of July 2023 in Niger, where Presidential Guard Commander General Abdulrahmane Nchani proclaimed himself the leader of a new military junta. My guest on Newsnight has placed the blame for this wave squarely on regional instability, poor governance by elected leaders, and many successful past coups. Successful in the sense that the juntas hardly ever resolved the issues for which they took power. He suggests that the government in the region focus on investment in education, health, agriculture, and infrastructure as a panacea. Newsnight talks to a career diplomat with over 35 years working at the highest levels of government in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Presidency, the Embassy of Nigeria in the Netherlands, and the Consul General of Nigeria in Atlanta, Georgia, USA, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Your Excellency, Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you for joining us on Newsnight as we discuss the issues happening around Niger and the ECOWAS sub-region. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let me just start off by asking you how you have been. It's been a hectic few days since the 28th of July, and I'm sure you've had so many calls coming to you to say one thing or the other about this matter.
Well, you're right, but we're surviving it, and we are watching, and we're trying the best we can to make people and Nigerians understand exactly what is at stake in, on issues like this. For me, that has always been my interest in terms of my public engagement, to enlighten people and ensure that they have a clear understanding of the issues, that we are discussing.
Okay, Ambassador Keshi, let's go back again. So 28th of July came in. It was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people. I mean, considering the fact that just a few days or a few weeks before that, the Nigerian president took over as the chairman of the ECOWAS, and he made a statement that many considered as a decisive statement, pointing to the direction that Nigeria, the ECOWAS sub-region, and indeed Africa was headed. Democracy all the way. So what do you think? Is this a reaction to that?
In my engagement with some of my colleagues, I have asked them what is so decisive and courageous about such a statement. In the first instance, I'm actually puzzled, very puzzled, by the fact that, in his acceptance speech as ECOWAS chairman, that the president focused on the issues of coup or coups, when there are more fundamental issues affecting the region and the states in the region. There is underdevelopment, there is poverty, there is democracy in retreat, so many other issues. There's, ECOWAS is as old as how many years now? More than almost 40 years. And we are nowhere near integration, because ECOWAS was set up for the economic integration of the region. But it has been distracted over the years by issues of, insecurity and the rest of it. I mean, for example, for 10 years, ECOWAS was doing nothing but trying to sort out Liberia and Sierra Leone. So there are more fundamental issues that I thought the president should have focused on. And I was actually surprised that he focused on coup. And I've been asking myself, what exactly led to this issue of coup, when he said we shall no longer accept coups or encourage coups or something like that? This is not something you can control for so many reasons. So you don't go ahead promising, to deal with something you cannot control. And as I don't know whether to say luck or fortune we have it, a few weeks after, he's not confronted with, a situation in Niger, that I'm not too sure how well prepared. And I just think that yesterday's communique by the heads of state, I'm not sure that they are thinking the whole thing through and proper.
So, but since you've gone directly to that, let's look at that. Those sanctions that were put out against Niger Republic, there are those who would argue that indeed there are very strong sanctions, and they look like, well, you say you don't think they've been thought through, but they look like sanctions that had maybe been applied to some other nations and they had worked. So applying it here, because it's not just Niger, there's still the other matter about Mali that is yet to be resolved. So maybe the decision...
Has sanctions worked in Mali? Has sanctions worked in Guinea? Because the presidents of Mali and, the coup plotters or those who took over government in Guinea and in Mali, they have not repented. They have not restored the democratically elected government that they overthrew. They are still there. So I don't really know how you're saying that sanctions will work. And in the case of Niger, bear in mind that Niger has a wide, I think border with about 6 or so or 7 countries.
7 African countries.
7 African countries. Cameroon is not a member of ECOWAS. So we have to consult Cameroon to make it work. Mali will be very happy to have somebody in its own camp who has defined others and assist Niger leaders to survive. So you begin to see the intricate nature of this thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not in support of coups or military intervention, But what we must realize is that sometimes it is a failure of leadership. It is a failure to address some fundamental issues, particularly concerning the welfare of the people, that encourages the military, to rise. You could see the demonstrations that are taking place in Niger, for example. Look, the whole of the Sahel region is in crisis. And I thought that this is an area we should have focused to find out how do we deal with this crisis in the Sahel regions. But instead, we started talking of coups, and here we are confronted with coups. I've heard some people talk of military intervention. For goodness sake, I think we should stop overreacting and trying to make ourselves, unnecessarily big boys. This is something you can, after our ECOWAS experience, I thought we should be more circumspect in deciding military actions, particularly given the fact that in the last 10 or so years, our own military have had issues trying to resolve the insecurity in Nigeria, particularly in the Northeast. And as of today, the Nigerian military, I think it's in 32 out of the 36 states. So already our military is overstretched. And when we went to Liberia and Sierra Leone, by the way, we were not too well prepared, but along the way, we started getting our acts together. At that time, we had the resources. We had a very strong military, and you saw what they did. Today, we are facing serious economic problems at home. I'm not too sure we have the resources for any military engagement outside this country. Besides that, in ECOWAS, the rest of West Africa, and in fact Africa, virtually left Nigeria to carry the burden. Are they going to do the same to us now when we don't have the resources? So there are a number of issues that we need to consider. And look, it's okay to condemn coups, but we must not forget what often leads to coups. The same ECOWAS heads of states at some point decided that they were going to outlaw unconstitutional change of government. Some leaders, I remember Togo, I think Senegal, I remember, I don't know whether Ivory Coast was involved. These leaders, 3 leaders, opposed doing that, and the other member states agreed with them. Why did they refuse that? Because they wanted to extend their stay in power. And so these are some of the things that, and not only do they want to extend their stays in power, they are not being just, they are not being fair, they are not being equitable in their countries, they are not developing the country as they should. And so when people begin to cry out and the military strikes, it is not for us, the rest of us, not to face the reality. We should find a better way of dealing with the situation. So I'm in favor of saying, let's talk these guys out of the madness they've gotten themselves into. But if they say no, we better find a better way, because for me, my surprise is to hear everybody say, or some people say, oh, we should invade, we should put troops together. You cannot even organize troops in 7 days.
But Ambassador Keshi, there are some things that you have highlighted here. One is what might have led to the coup. I mean, the coup in Niger being the latest one. We have the one in Mali and the one in Ghana. I mean, in Guinea, rather. What might have led to this coup? You mentioned the issue of governance and the fact that those who are leading the nations are not doing what they should do by the people. So that gives room for the military of these nations to want to, step in. Is it impossible to get this matter of governance on the ECOWAS sub-region resolved once and for all?
Well, no. For what you are saying, it looks as if it's becoming even difficult to resolve. Because countries conduct elections that are not free, that are not fair, they are not credible, just like we've done in this country, and everybody gets upset. Look, in Nigeria, for example, and I'm sorry to bring Nigeria into this conversation, but this is our country. Since 1999, the Supreme Court, or the courts, except in 2015, when Jonathan did not go to court, since 1999, the courts have been the deciding factor in the elections, not the people. Because sometimes there's a disagreement about who won and who did not win. And when you look at some of the judgments, they are not based solely on facts, but more on technicalities, in order to retain whoever has been proclaimed the president. So you find this happening in some other parts of the region. I give you an example that I've been citing in a number of conversations I've been having with people. Look at if young Yadema, now is old, pardon me. He's been in power for how many years? He's almost going to equal his father's record of 30-something years. He has virtually suppressed all opposition. If there's a coup today, will anybody be surprised? In Togo? Of course, nobody would be. When the president of Senegal did what he did, but for the tenacity of the people who insisted they would not allow him to have a third term. If a coup had happened in Senegal, would anybody have been surprised? Because it happened in Guinea when the gentleman there decided that he wasn't going to leave. He was going to change, the constitution. The gentleman in Central African Republic, after many years, has also decided that he was going to come up with a new constitution. Basically, that gives him a third term. So when you begin to, when there's there's solid foundation for democracy and no credible, free, fair election, which is the first thing about democracy. And the other thing is the absence of development in a number of these countries. What do you expect? So I'm not, again, let me emphasize, I'm against military intervention. What I'm saying, let's not be carried away, particularly in this country. We have our own crisis. Let's not be carried away by the fact that we are ECOWAS chairman or want to show courage, want to be decisive, want to be tough, and get ourselves into a big mess than we are now. So what we should do, we should find a way to persuade these people. But more interestingly for me, I just think that we should focus on the big picture. What are the causes of coups in West Africa? What are the problems? How do we resolve these issues? We thought in the last couple of years that that democracy will flourish in this part of the world, and we are done with military coups. But the fact that there are military coups is a clear indication that democracy is even failing in West Africa. Because we are not having this kind of situation in East Africa. We are not.
What if that matter of democracy, what if we pull back a little bit? I mean, the nations on the ECOWAS sub-region pull back a little bit and do what some have described as homegrown democracy, a democracy that fits into the lifestyle or history or culture of the people of the region. Would that make a difference?
Look. I don't understand when we've been hearing of this homegrown democracy for years, and I've never been able to understand exactly what it means. Well, now let me step back a little. Maybe homegrown democracy is exactly what is causing coups. When politicians rig election, and then they are confirmed by electoral bodies, and then the judges confirm it. Maybe that is homegrown democracy, but it never survives. It creates more problems. Democracy is democracy. There's no homegrown, foreign grown, or village grown. It is simply democracy. It's a government by the people, for the people, by the people, as defined by President Abraham Lincoln. It's a choice that the people have to make in choosing their own representatives, not the courts, which is what we've been doing. And it's a choice that sometimes military officers are compelled to decide for the people, and then they come in power, they repeat exactly the same thing that the politicians have done that led to coups, and then they themselves are overthrown. So it's beginning to look like a vicious circle. So it is all about the issue of leadership. It's all about leaders understanding what is expected of them, to do the right thing, to be fair, just, and equitable, to engage in development, take interest in the welfare of the people. That is all the people ask for. I always say to people say to you that, oh, I traveled to London, I traveled to the United States and elsewhere. Those people no longer believe in God. And I said, why? What gives you that impression? He said, because when you go to the church, the churches are empty. And I said, well, you are right about that. The church is being empty. But come to think of it, everything that is prayer point in Nigeria, they have it. Here in Abuja, as soon as it's about to rain, the light goes off, and that's it for the whole day. A man that was born the same year I was born in some of this country, has never seen light go off. But almost every night in this country, now in Abuja, there's no lights anywhere. The lights go off, we all live on generator or inverter. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
and you can't really expect people to be happy about that. Or is it the schools? Or is it the economy? No, precisely what? And every time governments keep doing about the same, you change the government, they do the same thing. We've had 8 good years. How did we end in those good 8 years? And in another couple of months, see where we are. Here you have labor trying to go on strike. And if all these things goes, badly and something happens in Nigeria, will anybody be surprised? So I keep saying to anybody who cares to listen, that for me, it's not just about the issue of the day. Leaders of this, we should hold leaders in this part of the world accountable. They are solely responsible for the issues that we are dealing with. Leaders are more the causes of coups. Because they do the wrong things and the people rejoice when they are overthrown. And we must not overlook that factor. And of course, I know that if there's a coup in Niger today, there are those who, another coup against the current leadership, the military guys, there'll be another group that will rejoice. What does that tell you? That the people themselves are confused because they do not even know which leader to trust and which leader will serve like a messiah or a savior. So it's a dilemma and that we must all recognize and find a way to resolve it. Unfortunately, I don't see how it can be resolved because the recruitment process in terms of politics in the region, it's virtually hopeless.
You know, Ambassador Keshi, when you started again, you talked about the fact that the region itself is not even united as it should be. It's supposed to be sort of like a homogeneous yet different body, that's the ECOWAS sub-region, and that unity has not been since the formation of ECOWAS. And why do you think that? So maybe that's part of the reason why we're not getting the kind of governance that we desire on the sub-region. Do you think that's a contributory factor?
Sorry, could you come again? It's raining heavily here in Abuja.
Okay.
If I can.
So you said something earlier about the fact that the ECOWAS sub-region is not as united as it should be. It's supposed to be an economic, there's supposed to be seamless flow of trade across the countries in the sub-region. There's supposed to be ease of travel across the countries in the sub-region. But even that does not seem to be existing. And some have said it's because of the kind of leadership that we have in the different countries, where each country wants to hold on to its own. This is my territory and I want to hold on to it. Allowing that free flow of trade and all across the country, the sub-region, might not allow for individuals to hold on to the leadership they seem to have. Do you agree with that school of thought?
Well, yes. So, you know, to a large extent, I agree with that. And I have also always argued that we are facing the problem we have in this region simply because Nigeria itself has refused to grow up. If Nigeria grows up, becomes a productive country, if Nigeria grows up, become a strong democratic country where elections are conducted free, fair, and squarely, and no courts decides any case. If Nigeria is doing well in all facets of life, I can assure you Nigeria will have the capacity, the confidence to be able to drive issues and development in the rest of the sub-region.
So are you implying then that Nigeria is more or less like a major factor in these issues around the sub-region and on the continent?
No. When you look at the EU, there are two great countries in the EU that have made EU what it is today: France and Germany. France and Germany. When you look at on the American side, the three countries there, the biggest trading partner is Canada and Mexico. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So if we had lived up to expectation, up to our destiny, since the 1960s, in fact, at independence, I think it was the Times of the United States then that created this image and picture of, the big elephants, a nation that was expected to rise, and pull the rest of the continent along with it. We have not lived up to that expectation. So the point I'm making is that, and I'm very confident when I say this, that if we grow as we are expected to, and we are able to project leadership and help others, certainly we can use ECOWAS itself to drive development in the whole of West Africa. So again, it boils down to whether we are prepared for that role of seeing economic development as the founding fathers had proposed throughout the whole region. And that is why I can say, even here in Nigeria, the first thing I said in reaction to some of the policies of the current administration is that our focus should have been first security. Once you secure the land, you can begin to do other things. Because even the food you talk of, the food is, Bandits are occupying most of the farming areas. The same thing in West Africa. The Sahel is in Sahel region. It's in big crisis in terms of insecurity. ECOWAS must figure out how to deal with that situation. And then they need to focus on economic cooperation and integration, because that will help everybody. It has helped the European Union. So why would it not be achievable here in this part of the world? Exactly why? And why is it not even happening? Why is it not even happening?
But the kind of system now that, but you also said something here, sorry. You also said that the president's position when he took over as chairman, being forthright, and that's the word, being forthright to say this is what has to be on the sub-region, and then he used the words, Nigeria is back. Doesn't that point to where the nation is going to? That Nigeria is ready to take its place in the area of government?
Look. Nigeria is back. Back to where and from where? When you say Nigeria is back, there must be certain things that you are thinking of. Yes, we are back as we are back as a nation in the fact that we've had an election that is still contentious, by the way. Okay? That's number one. Number two, our economy. How strong is the economy today? How strong is the security in the country itself today? How strong is our educational system? How strong is our food security? I mean, look at today, go to the market and see the prices of things. So exactly where are we coming from and where are we back to? So these are some of the things. Look, leaders are often advised, not just in this country, but all over the world. Leaders are often advised to stay by the script. Don't go off the script, because it creates problems on its own. You saw what happened from inauguration. Subsidy is out. Fair enough. There was no proper arrangement made for palliatives or whatever needs to be done to the people. And where are we? Prices have gone off the roof. Now Nigeria is back, no more coups. A few days after or weeks, coup happened, not just in faraway land, next door to our neighbor. And we are all scrambling. You need to see the debates going on in a number of platforms as to what to do. And everybody, there's a division. Now people are realizing the reality of that statement, that we shouldn't have boxed ourselves into a corner. So back to where? Yes, we all love to see this country back. We all love to see this country become a great nation in itself, for the simple reason that the people are not lazy, the people are industrious, they are doing fantastically well anywhere, whether in this country or anywhere in the world. I look at some of the things that young people are doing in these comedy series, the sketches and so on, and I'm just amazed at the ingenuity of the people of this country. But as Chinua Achebe said a couple of years ago, our problem still remain leadership. And until we can find a way to resolve that issue, anybody can contest it. And I will continue to let people know that until we can find leaders, look, please don't get me wrong. This is not about the president or about the federal government. There is leadership failure across board, both at the state level, at the institutional level, virtually all levels. Why are our institutions not functioning well? For example, somebody has just been appointed to probe the central bank. The president, I'm not too sure. I'm looking at some of the papers. I'm not too sure that the president has the powers to do what he has just done on the central bank. And then sign it himself. But if you look very closely at our laws, I'm not sure if that's what the president should have done. And then there's also questions about who is going to lead that inquiry. Then you begin to wonder whether this is policy or this is aimed at something else. And these are all what leads to questions about leadership and the process of decision-making and the kind of decisions that are made. A decision made for the common good or a decision made for personal vendetta, exactly what? I don't know. But collectively, let's go back to the issue. When you begin to do things like this, it creates its own problems that invariably lead to unintended consequences. And that's what leaders should try to avoid.
The situation in Nigeria is precarious, and indeed you talked about it. Nigeria not having its own situations, the security and all of that sorted out. So going after coup plotters in Niger might not really be that advisable to lead that onslaught. But then what about the interest of the externals, those from beyond the sub-region, the U.S., France? I mean, that's an argument that's out there. The U.S., the France, and then the Wagner Group that has also come up to say that they're supporting the coup plotters. How would that play out in the area of diplomacy at the end of the day?
You know, I have been criticized by friends and colleagues when I try to answer this question in my own way. Look. External forces will continue to interfere in our affairs, particularly in this part of the world, because of our weaknesses. It is as simple as that. Look, bear in mind, and let's not just isolate this issue or conversation only to ourselves. In the 60s, we were almost at par with some countries in the Asian country. Where are they today? Who is intervening in all those areas? Of course, people will tell you that Niger has uranium, and that's why everybody is, getting involved. For goodness sake, that is true. And by the way, there's so much credit being given to this group from Russia. They are new players in Africa, and overnight, we are now putting them as one of those creating problems all over the place. Look, let's be very careful about this. But the point I'm trying to make, and I'll go back to the issue, before us, we saw the Asian tigers. Before us, China, after the Cultural Revolution, reformed itself. Today is going to be the second largest economy. Before us, an unknown entity, not an unknown, a country that was virtually desert and nobody even knows where it is. UAR today, it's one of the most recognized countries where everybody, including we in this country, like to go to. How many years did it take them to get to where they are today? Practically less than 20 years. And we are in our 60th or how many years? So when you think of what others have done and what we have failed to do, perhaps you begin to see the direction in which I'm making my case. And the question is, why have these other countries in the Asian world developed, and why haven't we, and why are we in the situation that we find ourselves today? As a former president of Singapore will say, it's all about leadership. When you take the simple issue of corruption, for example, I'm sure you've read or you must have heard of how it was dealt with in Singapore.
Yes.
And I think there's some stories circulating here and there about the foreign minister of China to be executed for corruption. On a visit a few years ago to Singapore, we asked a question about corruption. And the answer we got from the leadership itself was that, yes, if anybody contravenes the law in terms of corruption, the answer he gave us, and I quote, we will deal with it in such a way that nobody will try it again. We will deal with it in such a way that nobody will try it again. And An accountant general was accused of 200 billion. Nobody is hearing about the case, not to talk of other cases. So why won't others be encouraged to do whatever they need to do and then settle those that are responsible for finding out what they've done? So these are some of the issues that we really need to begin to focus on. And if we think that it is not important and that we can continue with our bad ways, well, look, so be it. A few years from now, perhaps not me, we will come back, some others will be discussing, the same thing, until there's a conscious, drastic effort for us to change our bad ways in the region, particularly in West Africa, because the bulk of the problem is in West Africa.
Yeah.
Look at Ivory Coast. People fought, to get Ouattara in power, that the other man, I'm trying to remember his name, was not democratic. What did Ouattara do after 2 terms? He insisted on a 3rd term. And this was a man who refused his predecessor a 3rd term. How do you explain that?
Maybe
the same thing with the guy yes. The same thing in Senegal. How did Sale get to office? And then after 2 terms, he decides that he wants a 3rd term. In so many ways, you find the same situation here in Nigeria, which again shows you that our democracy is actually not growing, and our system is just going from bad to worse.
Yes,
you have somebody.
We have.
Somebody has been chief of staff. He's been governor. He's been director general. Now he's struggling to be a minister again. Then when he leaves the minister, he wants to be a governor again. So in the last 18 years, they've grown nobody but themselves.
Okay, so but then the question is it a problem of the laws that we have? On the region, because the laws appear to be solid enough to be studied in schools like the Harvards and all of that, but they don't seem to be working for us.
Oh, the laws?
Yes.
The law? No, it's not. Look, there's nothing wrong with the laws. It's not the laws. Look, when somebody who came 3rd in an exam or 4th in an exam overnight becomes number 1, as a result of somebody deciding that they were going to screw the judgment, how do you blame the law? It is we, the people, the people in authority. The people in authority decide they are going to, violate the law. They don't give a damn about the law. And that's why I said the president has just set up an inquiry on the CBN. We should be careful to ensure that he's doing the right thing. If he's not doing the right thing, I sincerely hope that we need to tell him that, no, you cannot do this. And then even the appointee itself, has a lot of question marks. And that is one of the things that should concern us, that when we want to do some dubious things, we look for some characters to use to do some of those things. So it's not the law. And by the way, because you are talking of the law, I have followed with some great interest the legal issues involved in the last election. And I'm beginning to think that I sincerely think that we need to rethink a lot of things. It seems to me that when elections are taking place, politicians are out campaigning and doing everything they can to win election. Lawyers in this country are praying that there will be crisis so that they can, of course, go to court. They are very well paid, paid. And you can see that the bulk of, cases that are decided so quickly and within certain days are electoral matters. In some states, they've been given judgment on electoral matters, whereas there are people who've been languishing in prison waiting for their cases to be called. There are some cases that have been in court for 8, 10, 15 years. And on what basis would the case be in? Is it that the lawyers are not coming to court or they are not interested in the case? But none of these lawyers miss the electoral petition cases. They are there, and in fact, some have 2 or 3 that they are handling. And they're making big bucks.
Ambassador Keshi, when you talk about the people, we the people, and what we're supposed to do, it's not about the laws, it's the people. In the case of Niger, for instance, they had an election, and this coup that returned President Bazoum, now the coup plotters have stepped in, but the people are still there, and the people appear to be okay with it.
But some people, bear in mind that for reasons that I say I have really not found anywhere, and maybe somebody will enlighten me someday. Remember that before its inauguration, there was a coup attempt for whatever reason. You remember? There was a coup attempt before the inauguration, which is survived. And look, Niger is hotbed of coups. I don't know how many coups, successful and failed coups, that have taken place in Niger. When you see things like that happening, there must be something fundamentally wrong with the system. And those who want to help Niger should step in and say, look, what is the problem? Why is the military always interfering or intervening in these matters? Of course, a number of people have been accusing fingers to either the Americans or the French, or now you find, they're now pointing at fingers at the Russians. If the leaders had come together, united, and have a roadmap on how they are going to develop their country, look, what is in uranium? Anybody who has the money to buy uranium will come to Niger and buy uranium. Nobody, not one single country in the world, can go in there and say we are going to take total control of the uranium in Niger. I mean, we are selling oil to anybody around the world. They are not the only country with uranium. It's like when you begin to talk of the situation in Congo, DRC. In spite of the wealth of that country, they are one of the poorest, people in the world. And why? Bad leadership from the 60s till today.
What is it that the leaders in these countries, on the sub-region, for instance, are afraid of doing business with the other countries? I mean, is Niger afraid of doing business with Mali, or Mali with DRC and all of that, so that there's wealth transfer and development and economic growth applies across the different countries? Is there a fear there?
No, I don't think there's a fear. I just saying that you see, this was why ECOWAS was created, to put in place the structure for inter-African trade. I mean,
West African
community trade, West African trade. I don't really think that the structure has been properly put in place. Understand? So we've just been doing whatever we like. Look, all the smuggling that is done in this country actually comes from both Niger and from Cotonou. Even we have allowed it, and when we are tired of it, we close our borders, which again is against the rules of the community itself. And that's because we've not put a proper structure in place. The rule is very clear. And again, you asked a very good question, because it's the only goods that are allowed in and out of these countries are ECOWAS goods, which now means that from day one, it was expected that we would be trading among ourselves. But what do? We import, for example, Nigeria, we import, land the bulk of everything in Cotonou, and then we begin to bring them into Nigeria and the rest. The question is, why have we allowed that to go on for a long time? If we, this country, Nigerian government over the years have said, listen, no more transshipment of goods through Cotonou to Nigeria. Only ECOWAS goods will be allowed to come by road. How do you think that would that not change a lot of things? and the rest would automatically follow. It now means that we will now be importing, whatever we import comes from the sea. And it will be very clear to us which are ECOWAS goods as against what we are now doing. We import so many things, land them in Cotonou or Togo, and then we bring them into Nigeria. We are actually violating the rules of the organization.
Dr. Keshi, as we begin to wind down, let's look at what's the way forward. I mean, what advice would you give to the leaders and indeed the sub-region as we try to resolve this matter of the coups and ill governance on the sub-region?
Look, I think it's very easy, to be candid. Well, let me not say it's very easy. I always like to use that word.
Excellency, your camera is turned off, so we're not seeing you.
No, I think it's very easy. Today, in this part of the world, I like to say that we are not pioneers. We are not pioneers of anything. Let's not kid ourselves. We are not pioneers of anything. So we are also, there's no punishment if you copy and paste, but localize it in a way and manner that it benefits you. So you can say to yourself, after all, I remember a couple of governors have traveled to Dubai some 2 years ago, and they come back jumping up and down, rejoicing and saying, oh, I'm going to turn my state into Dubai. I'm going to turn my state into Dubai. At the end of the day, they did not even build one good road as good and as excellent as a road in Dubai. So again, it just shows you not just the mindset, but the intellectual capacity of our leaders. Because when the leaders of Dubai were conceptualizing what they were going to do in Dubai or UAR as a whole, they never for 1 second say to themselves, we are going to turn our city into London. We are going to turn our city into New York. No. They sat down and conceptualized what they want their country to look like. That's exactly what we need to do. If we have leaders that have the intellectual capacity to first of all sit down and conceptualize where this country will be in a couple of years' time from now. 2, then you now decide, what is the roadmap? How do we get to how do we get to achieve these things? There are 3, 4, or 5 triggers of development. Agriculture is one. Education is another. Health is another. Infrastructure is another. If you genuinely focus on this, not based on contracts, focus and ensure that we develop agriculture. We do a lot more on health. We develop education, both technical and create the skills for the 21st century. And we pay attention to infrastructure. Not build infrastructures that we cannot use, but we also have to repay the loans that we took to build the infrastructure, as we have in the case of the rail line here in Abuja, from here to the airport that is not working, and we are going to pay the loan. Again, why? Because a number of mistakes were made in conceptualizing the whole project. And you begin to ask yourself, how on earth could such a mistake be made? So it boils down that we need the skills, we need the knowledge, we need tremendous amount of honesty in the whole business. There's no doubt about that. And except we can do all these things, leaders should just come and say, I'm here to do the will of the people. Pure and simple. Mistakes will be made. But if they are genuine mistakes, the people would agree with it, forgive them, and they move on. But if all they care about is themselves, They want to be the only ones. They make so much money from every government activity they are involved in. And at the same time, it's sometimes so painful when you see what is going on in this country. You see people spend 8 years, for example, as governors, and they leave their states as worse as they met it, even if not worse. And then they go into Senate again. Why are they able to do this? Because they have ensured that their people remain poor, uneducated, and unable to make informed decisions about them. So if we have to grow, we need to change some of these things. It's not that way. So I'm saying, let's look at what the rest of the world has done in all these areas. Let's look at what they've done and copy the ones and domesticate. In fact, there's nothing to copy. They invested in agriculture, so we invest in agriculture. Subsidize agriculture. United States subsidize agriculture. EU subsidize agriculture. That will pay everybody because it will bring down the cost of foodstuff. Subsidize education. Again, that will ensure that many more people are educated and the right skills are acquired.
All right.
Subsidize health and see whether this country will not blossom.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Joe Keshi. Thank you for speaking with us on Newsnight.
Thank you very much, and wonderful being with you. And nice to see you again, by the way.
That's our program today. Thank you for staying with us. We would like to know your stand on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get started. I am Neota Igwe.